This movie deceives you even before the very first frame. It starts with a poster. This movie has a number of different posters, but these are some of the more common ones. What do you see? What does this poster make you expect the movie to be? Perhaps something like The Notebook, Pretty Woman, Harry Met Sally, or any one of many romantic comedy movies. But the thing is, at the midpoint of this movie, this guy right here, just disappears. Yes, around the 57-minute mark, he bails, and we only see him functionally in the story again in the third act, stripped of any agency. No, this is not a romantic comedy or even a romance movie. This is a movie about class struggle. Class has always been integral to many romance movies.
Oh, no. Those are 3 fingers.
From Cinderella to Pride and Prejudice to Pretty Woman, class is often the obstacle that lovers must overcome. Often it is the man who must pluck a woman from a middling life and make her part of his grand and resplendent world of riches. And so with this in mind, let's do a quick synopsis of Anora. We see the eponymous Anora, who truncates her name to Annie, in her natural environment, working the clients, doing her thing, selling her services. We get a brief glimpse into her personal situation. She lives in a modest house with her sister. And so one day, a rich young guy, Vanya, comes into the club and subsequently secures her services privately, and then offers her $15,000 to be exclusive with him, an offer that Annie accepts. Their relationship develops, and then he takes her on a hedonism-heavy whirlwind tour in Vegas with his friends. Over the course of the week, their relationship deepens and Vanya asks her to get married. While she is apprehensive at first, she accepts. However, her marital bliss is short-lived. This is where the conflict starts and where the movie truly departs from a familiar narrative. See, a bunch of goons show up at Vanya's house and chide him for marrying a stripper.
Put me on a fucking speaker so this hooker can hear me too.
He just called me a hooker?
We learn that they are employed by his parents and their job is to ensure that he doesn't go too far off the rails as his parents live abroad. And at this point, Vanya runs away.
Okay, bye!
And they try to force Annie to sign annulment papers and take away her ring, which she furiously resists. Now this section is played as a farce and I could not stop laughing the whole way through. Annie is just a ball of energy and is sassy as hell, and I absolutely loved the comical incompetence of the goons trying to restrain her. After Annie has calmed down, she is offered $10,000 to annul the marriage with Vanya, which she accepts, but with the real intention of meeting up with Vanya so he can reaffirm his love for her. Annie and the goons then set off in search for Vanya so they can get both Annie and Vanya to a court to annul the marriage. After a night of hijinks, they finally locate Vanya. But their plan to get the marriage annulled fails as Annie and Vanya got married in a different state. And by this point, Vanya's parents have arrived in the country, and then all of them set off to Nevada for the annulment. Annie, after much resistance and after realizing that Vanya never truly loved her, signs the papers dissolving her marriage. So what was it all for? What does it all mean? Anora is not a rom-com, it is a story about class struggle. Annie finds herself suddenly at a much higher rung in the class ladder, and she fights to stay there. She believes she has transformed from a stripper to a respectable wife, and that is what her ring represents.
But Ivan and I are married, okay? This is a real marriage.
He's on your phone?
Yeah, it's on the husband. I am Ivan's fucking wife!
And she fights the goons who attempt to knock her back down the social ladder. While she insists that Vanya loves her, this is hard to believe as a viewer. She is a stripper who was essentially purchased by a rich young man. We should talk about Vanya here a little. We know that he's frivolous and desultory. There are only 3 things that interest him: video games, drugs, and sex. A trifecta of sensation, and they are all interchangeable. When Vanya and Annie have sex, Vanya does it for him, for his own gratification. He's simply using her body, just as he does with drugs and video games. So why does Annie fall for him? She, of all people, must be most resistant to becoming seduced, right? I mean, her very job is one of deception, one of providing surrogate and ersatz experiences. A meeting at a strip club, a rapid romance, an immature man, it seems crazy to think that a street-smart girl like her could actually believe it. And I think it's because she yearned for an escape. So she readily believed the lie. She was primed to believe it the way many men may think that the strippers actually like them. Annie fights to keep her position on the social ladder. Unlike Cinderella, she curses the clock that, with the turn of his hands, transforms her carriage into a pumpkin. She tries to hold onto that ring that proves that she is a wife and that confers on her the respectability associated with being a wife, and the fur coat that represents her newly acquired position in the social hierarchy. Anora is perhaps a true Cinderella story, one that would likely play out in reality, where the prince would have used Cinderella as a plaything, as an amusement, to be later discarded. We also see the idea of the poor being used by the rich in the story of the goons, where once they are all on the plane, they all seat according to their class, segregated by their station. Annie, along with her tormentors, all belong to the same class, and there is some recognition of this fact at the end as they sit together.
I understand and forgive you what you did.
The goons live under the constant tyranny of their wealthy employers and must cater to their whims.
And now his parents are gonna kill me and my fucking family will never talk to me again.
At the conclusion of the film, she surrenders the ring and the fur coat, thereby relinquishing all her newfound respectability, and by subsequently accepting the $10,000, she goes back to being a commodity, cementing the idea that the whole affair with Vanya was merely a transaction. But there is more to Anora's story. See, within the movie is hidden another movie, a quirky romance not between Annie and Vanya, but between Annie and Igor. They have an awkward meet-cute and a slowly developing understanding that gives way to some unnamed species of affection. Igor is kind to Annie, and he is from the same social class and less caught up in pleasing his wealthy employers. While all the other goons call her a stripper and a prostitute, he congratulates Annie on her marriage.
I'm Vanya's wife.
Congratulations.
He quietly respects her fight, and when he, in the final scene, presents her with the ring that was taken from her, we see that he regards her with the respectability and legitimacy that she was denied. Igor observes that Annie is the only one who fights against the powerful, while the other two goons and even Vanya all submit to them. This story might be easy to miss, but it makes sense that it's not obvious. This love story between peasants is less detectable, less saturated, and pushed to the margins by the bigger and more bombastic affairs of the rich. The rich take up all the space and all the oxygen. And finally, let's talk about that ending. Annie is aware of herself as an object of lust. As I mentioned before, her job is performative, and her way of showing affection is through this language of performance. So when Igor is kind to her and gives her back her ring, she initiates sex with him. But when Igor stops and tries to kiss her, to do something real, that performance gives way. An immense reservoir of sadness is let loose within Annie. A sudden and complete exhalation of grief and disappointment and heartbreak overwhelms her. The veil is thus lifted, and we see her as Igor does, as the person she really is, who she is, rather than what she can provide.